Hey guys, what's going on? My name is Elliot, and welcome back to This and That Reviews, where I talk about movies by comparing them to other movies that may or may not be better, or in some cases, sometimes they're better, and I don't know. I just like talking about movies, and my go-to is like comparing them to other things. But this is War Machine with Alan Ritchson, and I'm actually going to compare it to a movie that I've never actually seen, but I could see it going the exact same way. And that movie is Predator. Predator 1, I saw like the first part of the movie. I know how the movie ends. I know that a lot of people don't make it to the end of that movie. And that it's more a war movie than it is like an alien movie. And that's literally what this movie is. This movie is promoted as like an alien invasion, and it was probably featured heavily in the trailer because that's the draw for this movie, that there's an asteroid and there's an alien invasion happening. But the actual reality of this movie is on Netflix. It's called War Machine with Alan Ritchson. The actual reality of this movie is that it's not an alien invasion movie, and in fact, there's just the one transformer looking robot, and that's it. That's the whole movie. I mean, like, if you're looking for the alien invasion part of this movie, it's one robot the entire time, not unlike a Predator movie, the first Predator movie with Arnold Schwarzenegger. Now, Alan Ritchson is not a powerful actor. Like, they're not going to give him monologue after monologue of, dialogue. And in fact, the one monologue that he does at the very end of the movie showcases to me that this is why this man does not have that much dialogue in this movie. And I want to say that, spoilers for the end of this movie and spoilers for this movie, but that's not really why you're watching this movie. You're not, wondering whether or not Alan Ritchson defeats the robot. Does he manage to make it to the end of the movie and defeat the robot? Like, I don't think that's why you're watching this movie. You're watching it for the action. You're watching it for like the macho man, that's what this movie is. And for the most part, it's not, like I said, it's not about an alien invasion. It's about a man who, spoilers for the beginning of this movie, who loses his brother and joins this new like Marine Corps, Army Corps. I think it's called RASP. It has like some acronym code name that they never really talk about because it doesn't really matter. And he joins and he like enlists into this different branch, I guess. And he has to go through basic training, even though he already was basically like a Marine. And he has to go through basic training, and then he gets sent, him and his team get sent on their first mission, which is a regular mission until giant robot appears. Now, I feel like with minimal changes, this movie could go from being the forgettable nothing that it is at the end of this movie to being something that's about something. And with the knowledge that Alan Ritchson isn't really that great of an actor in terms of dialogue, he's not given a lot of dialogue in this movie, but that's probably because they know he's not really a dialogue guy. He's just a big, beefy man that can do, manly man things, right? If you know that information, the way that you structure this movie is the idea, and they bring it up like midway through the movie. He's going through basic training, and he's beating everybody. He's like lapping them when they're on runs. He's successfully doing every single like physical task. And they bring it up in the midpoint of the movie where they're like, your physical strength is not your weakness. Your weakness is the fact that you have not interacted with any of the other cadets. You don't have any friends here. Nobody cares about you. That is your weakness. Your weakness is that you are constantly alone, right? And so you would assume one would assume that when he goes on this, like when the movie starts going, like the real movie that you came here to watch, once that starts going, and let me say that's like an hour into this 2-hour movie. A lot of this is him in basic training. You would assume that once it goes into the actual meat of this movie, where they're on the mission and they're trying to evade the giant robot, you would think that this is his turning point, where he gets to know every single one of the people that's in his company, right? And what this movie instead decides to do is that he has one friend that believes in him more than Alan Ritchson would allow him to, but he believes in him, and you don't know why, and it's a twist, kind of. I won't spoil that. But where this movie like finally ends off is him and like this one guy make it to the end of this movie, and that's it. And he doesn't really learn anything. And the idea is that in like the next movie that they're probably never gonna make, is when he would finally become a regular person and have friends. And I feel like if you knew that you didn't want to give this man dialogue, if you decided to restructure this movie to where you go through basic training, but through the eyes of the cadets that are going to be on the mission eventually with him, that, you know, like all the people that eventually get to the end of, you know, all of the training and are selected for this mission, if you go through basic training, where you showcase like the first part of the movie, and you know there's the myth that he's a war hero, and that he is somebody that's the reason why he's there, and he's so tough, and you know he brought his brother. He hiked 10 miles with his dead brother on his back, and, you know, made it to like the end of the thing, right? And if you just make that your focus, where you're going through the entire, you know, like half of this movie with all of the cadets, and you're learning their names, and you're, you know, like you're in the movie with them, as opposed to being in the movie with Alan Ritchson, where you don't get to know any of their names, you don't get to know any of their personalities, you are simply watching this man be the manliest man and just completing every challenge. If you decide to make it to where you're in the shoes of all of those people, and you learn all their names and you learn all their quirks, and the movie is, you know, like that first half of the movie is about them, and then you go into the mission, all of a sudden now you are invested in all of these characters. And now you allow Alan Ritchson to do what he does in that midpoint of the movie. But when everybody dies and Alan Ritchson doesn't care, it makes more sense. And you feel, as the audience, like the loss that each of these people dying should bring you, where in the way that the movie is structured in its form, you don't care about the people. In the same way that Alan Ritchson's entire character flaw is that he doesn't care about anybody. He doesn't care about anybody, and that was why like they didn't want him to be, you know, like approved to be a ranger. And you just kind of go through the back half of this movie where he, like, people are dying and he doesn't care still. And then at the end of the movie, he's like, I get it. I should care about people. And it's so weird. It's so weird that like they save his character development as like a line about the, you know, as a you know, a thing that happens at the end of this movie that leads into a second movie. And so he has no character development. And then there is no character development for any of the other characters because they're too busy focusing on Alan Ritchson and how manly of a man he is. And if that's all you want in your movie, that is what this movie is. It's just Alan Ritchson being, you know, like a top army ranger and doing all the physical things. Then he continues doing all the physical things in practice. And then, you know, just everybody else is just, cannon fodder. Everybody else is just like there to die. But like, I feel like the idea of this movie could have been made so much stronger if you knew everybody else's name, if you knew their personality, so that when they died on the mission, when Alan Ritchson doesn't care about anybody, and it's very obvious that he just doesn't, that he could theoretically, on the mission, learn to care. And I get that that's not necessarily what this movie is about. It's not about, brotherhood, but it feels like that's the only thing Alan Ritchson is missing. And it feels like even though they tried to make that his character arc and that was his, and the movie points out that that's his only flaw, they don't do anything with it, which is insane. And I feel like with minimal restructuring of this movie and, like instead of, looking at the dinner table where Alan Ritchson is sitting alone, you instead focus on the group of friends that's forming and you learn to be like their friend and you invest into them so that when they start dying, it's more impactful. And it's more like obvious that like, why is Alan Ritchson so like reserved? And why is he so like, why doesn't he want to make friends? Why is he so antisocial? That would probably hit harder when you realize. And I feel like there's an idea that this movie could have been that. And I think that if it did that, being like the macho movie that it is, that would have amplified that so that when he is trying to save everybody, in, the individual ways that he tries to save everybody, their deaths would mean more. And you don't really change the story. You just restructure the framing. I feel like there was a movie called Passengers, with Chris Pratt and Jennifer Lawrence, where they're on board a space vessel that's traveling, for something really long, like 90 years or something. It's everybody's supposed to be in a hyperspace sleep, where their body is like frozen, and they're on a vessel going to a place. And it's going to take like 90 years or something like that, or 200 years, whatever it is. An amount of time that if you were to wake up, you would die. Now, spoilers for that movie, but there was an idea in that movie that it's structured wrong. Now, in that movie, and it's a big spoiler for this movie, so if you do want to watch this movie, like, go watch that movie, and I suppose come back to this review. But in that movie, Chris Pratt wakes up and he doesn't understand why. And then he eventually tries to figure out how to put himself back to sleep because, like I said, the amount of time that it's going to take for them to get to the place is you're going to die. You would die. A normal person would die. And so he's trying to put himself back to sleep. But once you get woken up, you can't go back to sleep. And so he just kind of like lives a life for a specific amount of time. And then he realizes, wow, I'm actually kind of lonely. I'm going to wake up Jennifer Lawrence because I want somebody to live this with me. And I think she's real pretty. And so he actively wakes up Jennifer Lawrence, and unlocks her hatch, dooming her to death. And he plays it off as like, oh, that's so crazy. I can't believe that we're both awake. Obviously, Jennifer Lawrence eventually finds out. It becomes an entire contentious thing. But there was an idea that if you did nothing to the plot and you restructured the movie to where the movie starts with Jennifer Lawrence waking up and then realizing, oh, that's so crazy. Chris Pratt is also awake. This is insane, right? And then you get to the point where he reveals that he woke her up and then flashes back to Chris Pratt waking up first, and then doing that entire story where he gets lonely or whatever. It fundamentally restructures the way that you watch the movie. Because that's a bigger twist than Jennifer Lawrence slowly eventually figuring out that Chris Pratt woke him up. And I feel like it's it's a slight thing, but if you just restructured it, for some reason the movie is just better. And I feel like this movie, with no like dialogue changes really, where you just focus your movie on the other characters that are eventually going to die, but it makes it for a better resolution and like character growth kind of moment for Alan Ritchson when all of these characters die that you have invested in, that he can now start to invest into these characters. Because as it is, it's just a Macho Man movie where a macho man is a macho man, and then at the end of the movie he's like, maybe I should have friends, and then the movie ends. And it's just, I don't know. I wished it was better.